Psychological effects are the ways in which specific events, experiences, or stimuli influence human behavior, thoughts, and emotions. These effects are often studied in psychology to understand how the mind works and how different factors can impact mental processes. In this guide, we will explore some of the most well-known psychological effects, explaining what they are and how they influence our behavior. 1. Placebo effect. The power of belief. The placebo effect occurs when a person experiences a real improvement in their condition after receiving a treatment that has no therapeutic value, simply because they believe it will work. This effect highlights the powerful role that expectations and beliefs can play in health and healing. For example, patients given a sugar pill, with no active ingredients, might report feeling better if they believe the pill is a real medication. The placebo effect demonstrates how the mind can influence physical outcomes based on perception. 2. Halo effect, generalizing from one trait. The halo effect is a cognitive bias where the perception of one positive characteristic of a person, such as attractiveness, influences the perception of their other traits, such as intelligence or kindness. This effect leads to the assumption that if someone is good in one area, they are likely to be good in others. For instance, a teacher might assume that an attractive student is also more intelligent or well-behaved, even without evidence to support this belief. The halo effect shows how our overall impression of someone can be skewed by a single characteristic. 3. Hawthorne Effect, behavior change due to observation. The Hawthorne Effect occurs when individuals alter their behavior because they are aware that they are being observed. This effect was first observed in studies conducted at the Hawthorne Works factory, where workers increased their productivity simply because they knew they were being studied. This effect demonstrates how the mere presence of an observer can influence people's actions, often leading to temporary improvements in performance. 4. Bystander Effect, diffusion of responsibility. The bystander effect refers to the phenomenon where individuals are less likely to offer help to a victim when other people are present. The more bystanders there are, the less likely it is that any one person will intervene, often due to the diffusion of responsibility. This effect was famously illustrated in the case of Kitty Genovese, where multiple witnesses failed to act during her assault. The bystander effect highlights how group dynamics can influence individual behavior in emergency situations. 5. Dunning-Kruger Effect, overestimating one's abilities. The Dunning-Kruger Effect is a cognitive bias where people with low ability, knowledge, or competence in a specific area overestimate their abilities. Conversely, people with high ability often underestimate their competence. For example, someone with little knowledge of a subject might believe they are more knowledgeable than experts, while true experts might doubt their own expertise. This effect illustrates the relationship between self-awareness and competence. 6. Mere exposure effect, familiarity breeds liking. The mere exposure effect suggests that people tend to develop a preference for things simply because they are familiar with them. This effect is based on the idea that repeated exposure to a stimulus increases positive feelings toward it. For example, a song that initially seems unremarkable might grow on someone after they hear it multiple times. The mere exposure effect is often used in marketing and advertising to create positive associations with a product or brand. 7. Pygmalion Effect, expectations, influence outcomes. The Pygmalion Effect is a psychological phenomenon where higher expectations lead to improved performance in individuals. This effect is based on the idea that people's beliefs about others can influence their behavior in ways that make the expectations come true. For example, if a teacher believes a student is capable of high achievement, they might provide more support and encouragement, leading to better academic performance from the student. The Pygmalion Effect shows how expectations can shape reality. 8. Spotlight Effect, overestimating others' attention. The spotlight effect is the tendency for people to overestimate how much others notice or pay attention to their actions, appearance, or behavior. This effect occurs because individuals are highly aware of themselves and mistakenly assume that others are equally focused on them. For example, someone might feel self-conscious about a small stain on their shirt, believing that everyone else notices it, when in reality, most people are unaware of it. The spotlight effect illustrates how our self-perception can distort our understanding of others' perceptions. 9. Cognitive dissonance. Discomfort from conflicting beliefs. Cognitive dissonance refers to the mental discomfort experienced when a person holds two or more contradictory beliefs, attitudes, or values simultaneously. To reduce this discomfort, individuals often change one of the conflicting beliefs or justify their behavior. For instance, if someone smokes despite knowing the health risks, they might rationalize their behavior by downplaying the dangers or convincing themselves that they will quit in the future. Cognitive dissonance highlights how people strive for internal consistency. 10. Confirmation. Bias. Seeking information that confirms beliefs. Confirmation bias is the tendency to search for, interpret, and remember information that confirms one's pre-existing beliefs or values while ignoring or dismissing evidence that contradicts them. This bias can reinforce existing opinions and prevent people from considering alternative perspectives. For example, someone who believes in a particular conspiracy theory might focus only on information that supports the theory while disregarding evidence that disproves it. Confirmation bias demonstrates how people process information in a biased manner to maintain their beliefs. 11. Barnum Effect. Belief in vague statements. The Barnum Effect is a psychological phenomenon where people believe that vague, general statements, often personality descriptions, are highly accurate and specific to them. This effect is commonly seen in horoscopes, fortune-telling, and personality tests. For example, a horoscope might say, "You have a strong desire for independence, but you also value close relationships," which could apply to almost anyone. The Barnum Effect shows how people can be easily persuaded by statements that seem personalized, but are actually broad and non-specific. 12. Social loafing, reduced effort in group work. Social loafing is the tendency for individuals to put in less effort when working in a group compared to when they are working alone. This effect occurs because people feel less accountable and assume that others will pick up the slack. For example, in a group project, some members might contribute less, expecting that others will do most of the work. Social loafing highlights the challenges of group dynamics and the importance of accountability and teamwork. 13. Sunk cost fallacy, justifying continued investment. The sunk cost fallacy is the tendency to continue investing in a decision or project based on the cumulative prior investment, time, money, effort, rather than the current costs and benefits. This fallacy occurs because people are reluctant to waste what they have already invested. For example, someone might continue watching a boring movie just because they've already spent an hour watching it, even though they could spend their time better elsewhere. The sunk cost fallacy demonstrates how past investments can irrationally influence present decisions. 14. Self-fulfilling prophecy. Expectations lead to realization. A self-fulfilling prophecy occurs when an individual's expectations about a situation or person cause those expectations to come true. This effect is often seen in social interactions, where beliefs about others influence behavior in ways that make those beliefs come true. For example, if a manager believes that a particular employee is unmotivated, they might give them less responsibility, leading to lower performance from the employee. The self-fulfilling prophecy shows how beliefs can shape outcomes. 15. False consensus effect. Overestimating agreement with others. The false consensus effect is the tendency to overestimate the extent to which others share our beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors. This effect occurs because people assume that their views are more common or normal than they actually are. For example, someone who enjoys a particular hobby might assume that most people share their enthusiasm, even if it's not widely popular. The false consensus effect highlights how personal experiences can bias our perceptions of others. 16. The gambler's fallacy. Misinterpreting randomness. The gambler's fallacy is the mistaken belief that if something happens more frequently than normal during a given period, it will happen less frequently in the future, or vice versa. This fallacy occurs because people misunderstand the nature of random events. For example, if a coin lands on heads multiple times in a row, a person might incorrectly believe that tails is more likely on the next flip, even though the odds remain 50-50. The gambler's fallacy illustrates how people often misinterpret patterns in random sequences. 17. Hindsight Bias. The knew-it-all-along effect. Hindsight bias is the tendency to see events as having been predictable after they have already occurred. People often believe that they knew it all along once they see the outcome of an event, even if there was little basis for predicting it beforehand. For example, after a sports team wins a game, fans might claim they knew the team would win, even though the outcome was uncertain before the game. Hindsight bias shows how the human mind reconstructs memories to fit with current knowledge. 18. Anchoring bias. The influence of initial information. Anchoring bias occurs when people rely too heavily on the first piece of information, the anchor, they receive when making decisions. This initial information sets a reference point that influences subsequent judgments and decisions. For instance, in negotiations, the first price mentioned often serves as an anchor, and all further discussions are influenced by that initial figure. Anchoring bias demonstrates how initial information can disproportionately affect decision-making. 19. Learned helplessness. Giving up after repeated failure. Learned helplessness is a psychological condition in which a person feels unable to control or change a situation due to repeated failures or negative experiences. As a result, they may stop trying to improve their circumstances even when opportunities for change are available. This effect was first observed in experiments with animals that were exposed to unavoidable negative stimuli, leading them to stop attempting to escape even when escape was possible. Learned helplessness highlights how past experiences can shape future behavior. 20. The just world hypothesis. Belief in a fair world. The just world hypothesis is the belief that the world is fundamentally fair and that people get what they deserve. This belief can lead to victim blaming, where individuals assume that bad things happen to others because of their actions or character. For example, someone might believe that a person who is unemployed is lazy rather than considering other factors like economic conditions or discrimination. The just world hypothesis illustrates how people often rationalize injustice to maintain a sense of order and fairness. 21. Fundamental attribution. Error. Overemphasizing personality traits. Fundamental attribution error is the tendency to attribute other people's actions to their character or personality while underestimating the influence of situational factors. This bias leads to overgeneralizations about others' behavior. For example, if someone cuts you off in traffic, you might assume they are a rude or inconsiderate person, rather than considering that they might be in a hurry due to an emergency. Fundamental attribution error highlights how people often misjudge the causes of others' behavior. 22. Rosy Retrospection. Remembering the past as better. Rosy retrospection is a cognitive bias where people tend to remember past events as being more positive than they were at the time. This effect can lead to nostalgia and the belief that the good old days were better than the present. For example, someone might look back on their school years with fondness, forgetting the stress or difficulties they experienced at the time. Rosy retrospection shows how memory can be selective and influenced by current emotions. 23. The Streisand Effect. Attempting to suppress information. The Streisand Effect occurs when an attempt to hide, remove, or censor information inadvertently leads to increased public attention and interest in that information. This effect is named after singer Barbra Streisand, whose attempt to suppress a photograph of her home led to the photo going viral. For example, if a company tries to remove negative reviews online, the attempt to suppress the information might draw more attention to the reviews. The Streisand effect illustrates how efforts to control information can backfire. 24. The Zeigarnik Effect. Remembering unfinished tasks. The Zeigarnik Effect is the tendency to remember incomplete or interrupted tasks better than completed ones. This effect occurs because the mind remains engaged with unfinished tasks, creating a sense of mental tension that enhances memory retention. For example, if you start a task but don't finish it, you might find yourself thinking about it repeatedly until it is completed. The Zeigarnik Effect highlights how the brain prioritizes unresolved tasks to maintain focus and motivation. 25. The McGurk Effect, auditory-visual interaction. The McGurk Effect is a perceptual phenomenon where the brain combines conflicting auditory and visual information, leading to a third, distinct perception. This effect demonstrates how our senses interact to create a coherent experience of the world. For example, if a person hears the sound ba while watching a video of someone mouthing fa, they might perceive the sound as va. The McGurk Effect illustrates the brain's reliance on visual cues to interpret speech. 26. The IKEA Effect, overvaluing self-assembled products. The IKEA effect is a cognitive bias where people place a disproportionately high value on products they have partially created themselves. This effect occurs because individuals feel a sense of ownership and pride in their work, even if the final product is not perfect. For example, someone who assembles a piece of furniture from IKEA might value it more than an identical pre-assembled piece simply because they put effort into building it. The IKEA effect highlights how personal investment can enhance perceived value. 27. The false consensus effect, overestimating agreement with others. The false consensus effect is the tendency to overestimate how much other people agree with one's own beliefs, opinions, and behaviors. This cognitive bias occurs because people assume that their views are more common or normal than they actually are. For example, if someone strongly supports a particular political candidate, they might believe that most people share their enthusiasm, even if that candidate is actually less popular. The false consensus effect illustrates how personal experiences and perspectives can distort our understanding of others. 28. The door-in-the-face technique, making a concession. The door-in-the-face technique is a persuasion strategy where someone first makes a large request that is likely to be rejected, followed by a smaller request. The smaller request is more likely to be accepted because it seems reasonable in comparison. For example, a charity might first ask for a large donation and, when refused, then ask for a smaller contribution. The person is more likely to agree to the smaller request after rejecting the larger one. The door-in-the-face technique demonstrates how contrast and perceived compromise can influence decision-making. 29. The Pratfall Effect. Perceived competence increases with mistakes. The Pratfall Effect is the phenomenon where a highly competent person is perceived as more likable after making a small mistake. This effect occurs because the mistake humanizes the person and makes them seem more relatable. For example, if a successful public figure makes a minor error during a speech, they might be seen as more approachable and down-to-earth, increasing their overall appeal. The Pratfall Effect illustrates how imperfections can enhance likability by making someone seem more relatable. 30. The Backfire Effect, strengthening beliefs when challenged. The Backfire Effect occurs when people strengthen their beliefs in response to evidence that contradicts them. This cognitive bias is a form of resistance to changing deeply held beliefs, where instead of reconsidering their views, individuals double down on them. For example, when presented with evidence that contradicts a political belief, a person might reject the evidence and become even more convinced of their original stance. The Backfire Effect highlights the challenges of changing people's minds, especially on deeply held beliefs. 31. The Endowment Effect, overvaluing what we own. The endowment effect is the tendency for people to place a higher value on things they own compared to identical items they do not own. This bias is driven by the psychological attachment to possessions, which makes them seem more valuable. For instance, if someone is selling a used car, they might price it higher than market value because of their personal attachment to it. The endowment effect demonstrates how ownership can distort perceptions of value. 32. The Peltzman Effect, risk compensation. The Peltzman Effect is a theory that suggests people adjust their behavior in response to perceived levels of risk. When safety measures are implemented, individuals may take greater risks, offsetting the benefits of those safety measures. For example, if seatbelt laws are enforced, drivers might feel safer and therefore drive more recklessly, potentially leading to more accidents. The Peltzman Effect highlights the unintended consequences of safety regulations and how people compensate for perceived risks. 33. The Availability Heuristic, judging likelihood by what's easily recalled. The availability heuristic is a mental shortcut where people judge the probability of events based on how easily examples come to mind. If something can be recalled easily, people assume it is more common or likely to happen. For example, after hearing about a plane crash on the news, a person might overestimate the risk of flying, even though statistically, air travel is very safe. The vividness and recentness of the information make it more accessible in memory, leading to biased judgments. 34. The serial position effect, remembering first and last items better. The serial position effect is the tendency to recall the first and last items in a series better than the middle items. This effect is divided into the primacy effect, better recall of the first items, and the recency effect, better recall of the last items. For example, when introduced to a group of people, you are more likely to remember the first and last names mentioned, and struggle to recall the names of those in the middle. The serial position effect highlights how the order of information can influence memory retention. 35. The just world hypothesis, belief in a fair world. The just world hypothesis is the belief that the world is fundamentally fair and that people get what they deserve. This belief can lead to victim blaming, where individuals assume that bad things happen to others because of their actions or character. For example, someone might believe that a person who is unemployed is lazy, rather than considering other factors like economic conditions or discrimination. The just world hypothesis illustrates how people often rationalize injustice to maintain a sense of order and fairness. 36. The contrast effect, perception influenced by comparison. The contrast effect occurs when the perception of something is influenced by the comparison to something else. This effect can make something seem better or worse depending on what it is compared to. For example, a job candidate might seem more impressive if interviewed after a less qualified candidate, or a price might seem like a better deal after seeing a more expensive option. The contrast effect shows how context and comparisons can influence judgments and decisions. Psychological effects offer insight into the complex ways our minds perceive, interpret, and respond to the world around us. Understanding these effects can help us recognize how our thoughts and behaviors are influenced by various factors, leading to more informed decisions and a greater awareness of our mental processes. Whether in everyday life, social interactions, or professional settings, awareness of these psychological effects can enhance our understanding of human behavior and improve our interactions with others.